Yeah.
I'm audible.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. I welcome you all. I am Ramakant Nargund from Community Task Force. I'm very happy to have this particular regular webinar series for to educate the citizens of in and around of HSR layout. As many of people may know that this Community Task Force, we have launched this particular group in the month of December 6th. We started with the four very eminent leaders in my community, Lalitamba, Kamesh, and Venkatesh and Vijay Kumar. We started with a single digit. I'm very happy to inform that today followers are more than 4 digits because the followers are because our immense service to the humanity has been identified by majority of communities. We are only concerned about the civic problems, health problems, educational problems, roads, street lights, so on and so forth. Looking at the pandemic situation, we stopped certain activities concentrating only on health issues. As knowing the pandemic problem, we thought that we'll have a series of educational webinars like this. We are lucky to have our Prashant Reddy in our group as one of the most active doctor who is organizing and helping us. No doubt, the medical science is a very big subject and people have been trained. Yesterday, the word was with what's of university. The lot of confusion it is creating in the different minds. The clarity should be there. Once we attend such webinars, the clarity will be there in the minds of a doctor because a qualified person is talking there. Because many subjects are coming, many things are there asking why we should not take a remdesivir, that is not available, ventilator not available. Even media also making a lot of havoc in the mind of a public. So we thought that why can't we have a regular webinar series? And yesterday we had a wonderful decision that why can't you have a series of these things specialty wise also? The one of the good suggestion Dr. Prashant has told that COVID problem in nephrology, COVID problem in oncology, pulmonology, and so on and so forth. The series because everybody's house they have got a different diseased people so that they will have a different guidance for them. There's one of the best move we did, and I'm sure that under the leadership of Prashant, we are going to have a regular series. The only thing is citizens come forward and they should listen what our specialists they speak about it. With the brief introduction, I'm very happy to today introduce our one of the hero or doctor. Dr. Sandeep HS. Is a Dr. Sandeep HS has done his MBBS from Davangere Medical College, and he did his post graduation from Belgaum, JN Medical College, Belgaum. Then, after his post graduation, he went to Mumbai. He had joined Fortis Hiranandan Mumbai under the Dr. Prashant Chagdi. And he had a lot of training there. He had a lot of inspiration to do for the specialization. Then he joined for his DM in a prestigious institution that is St. John's Medical College. And he was very further trained in the lung transplantation from Freeman Hospital, United Kingdom also. The one of the most important concept with Dr. Sandeep is practice evidence-based medicine. There's one of the sentence which I liked out of his whatever the profile he has done. And he has done a lot of publications in national and international level. And he's the active member of Indian Chest Society, European Respiratory Society, Indian Association of Bronchology, and he is presently Joint Secretary of Pulmonology Association. He is specialized in interventional pulmonology, tuberculosis, asthma, COPD, sleep disorders. We are really, really, really very happy to have such an experienced doctor who have got an opportunity for our HSR and CTF community to make an awareness about the present pandemic situation. Yesterday also we had our pediatric pulmonologist. There's another majority of mothers, they participate and ask a lot of questions, have a lot of clarification also. One of the most important problem that what community is facing. I once again welcome Dr. and Dr. Sandeep HS. And
Thank you, sir.
before
Thank you.
handing
Thank you
over
for
to
the
Dr.
kind
Sandeep,
introduction.
sir, there is no need to introduce our health segment captain, Dr. Prashant Reddy. Dr. Prashant Reddy has done his graduation and post-graduation from Bangalore Medical College. His specialization is endoscopic sinus and skull-based surgery. And apart from this, the doctor has got, I don't know, he did his MBA from Indian Institute of Management. This is the specialty of my captain, that he has got a wide knowledge of different things, how to organize, how to treat patient, how to talk to different people. He's a ventriloquistic man. He can other conferences. He answered in Telugu, he answered in Kannada, he answered in Tamil, many languages. We are very proud to have such a leader in my group also. He is associated with the BGS Hospital, Sagar Hospital, and cluster in charge of Bangalore INO Center, and in charge of NSRCL, Indian Institute of Management. With all these things, I request each participants, please listen carefully the whatever Dr. Sandeep sir says about us, and after finishing our deliberations, please ask your queries, and I want to see that everybody to take this particular benefit out of this. Thank you so much. Now I will ask Sandeep sir to hand it over. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir, for your kind words.
Thank you very much.
So, Dr. Sandeep, since both of us work in BGS and we have seen so many cases of COVID which are happening, and you being in the forefront of fighting this COVID, and so what do you feel are the qualifications for someone to get hospitalized? Because there's a lot of panic for people who, on the ground, people, the moment they say that, okay, my oxygen saturation is 93, they rush helter-skelter to find a bed. And unfortunately, many of the patients who don't require oxygen are blocking up these beds, especially the BBMP quota. So let me start with that. How do you approach such kind of thing, or what do you want to advise the people before getting hospitalized? Let me start with that question, then we'll go ahead accordingly.
Yeah, first of all, I would like to thank for inviting me for this webinar and for the kind introduction. I think you guys are doing a great job. See, the most important thing in this present scenario, whatever we are facing, is awareness. See, there are so many people talking about so many things, and majority of the people are in confusion. Rather than confusion, they are they're in a helpless situation. What to do? What is right to do? What not? What is wrong to do? All these misconceptions and misunderstandings are there. I think you guys are doing a great job. First, I congratulate you. Right? And as far as your question comes, when do you really require an admission? See, there are so many people who just come out and get admitted just because, no, there are elderly parents at my home, there are small kids at my home, so I don't want to risk them, so I just want to come and get admitted. See, hospital care should be reserved for the people who really deserve it. Okay, not everybody requires hospitalization. Okay, simple isolations. See, it's getting admitted just for the sake of being isolated from the family, or isolated from the kith and kin, or isolated from the friends and their close associates, is not the criteria for admission. Because we are a country with 1.3 billion population, and the healthcare infrastructure, whatever we have, is at least around 25 to 30 years behind the other advanced countries in the world. And with such a higher population and so many number of cases coming up daily, go on utilizing the resources for people who don't really deserve it, that is not a right thing on our part. So what are the best things? Who are the patients who require admissions? Is a question which has been put to me by Prashant, and I would like to make it clear. See, COVID is a viral infection, and viral infection spreads virally. Okay, so that is why it is called viral. The medium. So the rate of spread is very fast. Okay, so the number of people getting infected because of this virus are more. So as the infectivity goes on increasing, the virulence will gradually come down. Okay, that means not everybody who has been infected by the virus is going to get severely affected by the virus. For example, out of 100 cases, around 80 to 85 will come like any other common cold. Maybe the symptoms of COVID might drag a bit more than what a common cold does. to us, because common cold majority of the times it usually starts fading away by the end of third day. But in COVID, majority of the even mild symptomatic patient, 6 or 7 days. Hello.
Yeah, sir. I think, Aarti, can you mute on?
85% of the people will not require an admission. Okay. Remaining 10% might require admission depending upon the oxygen saturation level. See, oxygen saturation level, although is one of the major criteria, there are some cases where we go out of box, that rather than taking oxygen saturation only into consideration, we also take other comorbidities, other parameters, maybe the level of sugar control, or maybe the level of dehydration, or maybe the level of other complications. Because of dehydration, there could be a minor injury of the kidney or something which we notice by the initial evaluation. They are the ones who will require admission. So if you ask me to conclude this in a single word, okay, see, 85% of the people who get infected with COVID will be mild, so they don't deserve an admission right away. That doesn't mean that you should neglect the symptoms. No, you should not neglect, because you never know who will progress from mild to moderate and from moderate to severe. Okay, so we have to be vigilant. We have to monitor ourselves even at home with some basic thing. What is that basic thing? Basic thing is a pulse oximeter. Okay, and pulse oximeter is also a must. It is also bound to have some errors in reading. So what we generally do is we go by the clinical condition and associated these pulse oximeter readings to decide on whether the patient requires an admission or not. Okay, and there are people who directly present to us with the lesser saturation. They are the ones. See, now the cutoff has been decreased to 90. See, as long as the oxygen saturation is above 90, you are still in the moderate range. And if you are under appropriate treatment or appropriate monitoring by a qualified physician, I think you can be treated at home. Okay, you need not require an admission. See, to summarize, any person who is severely affected by COVID and his oxygen saturation is below 90 is the one who will really require an admission. Others can be managed and monitored. See, monitored is an important thing. See, management is different, monitoring. See, we never know who will progress from mild to moderate to severe. So even being at home, you need to be monitored for a certain number of days. And once certain number of days cross and you are introduced on certain medications before the oxygen saturation being dropped, most of you might be treated at home. So anybody with a saturation of less than 90 would be an ideal candidate to get admitted and utilize the resources of the hospital.
Got it. So as a summary, people who are less than having oxygen saturation less than 90%, and especially patients who have comorbidities, are the ideal ones who would require hospitalization. And so once someone gets into a hospital, there is a mad rush for the hospital beds and all those things. So let's not get into that aspect of it. But once they're hospitalized, what do you think would be the normal course of action? Because let all the people be well understood. They have that knowledge that, okay, these are the parameters which will happen in a COVID ward. Because what I'm getting desperate calls from so many people saying that, okay, doctor has come, we have been admitted 2 days before, no one has come. I think the main issue is almost everyone will be in a PPE. So they don't differentiate who is a nurse, who is a doctor, who is a ward boy. There is no proper differentiation. In fact, even when we go into rounds, we have to literally see and ask, who are you? So if you can give your perspective on how that should be handled, so that they have a knowledge that, okay, this is how a condition inside a COVID ward will be. So, because most of the time they'll end up in a COVID ward before going to any ICU or anything, or before getting discharged.
Yeah.
So, if you can give a broad perspective of that, that will be helpful for the general public.
Yeah. See, basically, once we have decided that we have, once we have decided to admit a patient, okay. So first thing what we do is, what is the criteria for admission? So whether it is oxygen saturation, or whether it is a overly controlled comorbidity, or whether it is a severe dehydration or any other complication associated with COVID infection. So first, the indication for admission is important, and the entire focus of the treating team would be to tackle that indication for admission. For example, if the patient is admitted because of hypoxia or whatever lack of oxygen, the first priority will be to supplement the oxygen in the ward and start them on necessary medications depending upon the stage at which they are. Okay. See, if you take the entire course of COVID illness, I would like to broadly classify it as a 2-week illness. Okay. See, it goes through various phases in these 2 weeks. At what phase the patient is becomes very, very important for us to tackle that particular patient. For example, if the patient is hypoxic in the initial 2 to 3 days, that means the viral phase is much more severe. So at that juncture, we would like to concentrate and start the patient upon some antiviral. For example, an injectable antiviral, if at all it is available. So we would like the patient to be started on antiviral. So if the patient has already crossed that viral stage, and if he is in the fag end of the first week or in the beginning of the second week of symptoms, at that stage, the viral replication or the viral phase would have already come down. See, the virus would have done whatever damage it has to do, and it would have, the replication would have stopped. At that juncture, I think the role of antivirals will gradually come down, and the role of anti-inflammatories takes the major role in the treatment part of it. So, depending upon the indication, the management of the patient is going to be decided. If the patient is being admitted for dehydration, I think the priority would be to hydrate the patient well with some IV fluids, and maybe if the patient is having very high fever, paracetamols and some other symptomatic treatment might be started. Okay. The most important is what is the indication for admission, and depending upon the indication of admission, the triaging of the patient is done. See, what we should understand is, see, even though you are admitted in a hospital, the care what you are going to get, the attention what you are going to get routinely is different from this particular pandemic situation. For example, everybody is overburdened with cases. So what we do in our hospitals is we do something called as triaging. That means prioritizing the patient, prioritizing the needs of the patient. The patient who requires more attention will be given a higher attention by the healthcare staff, and a patient who is relatively stable, whom we feel that the patient can hold on for some time, will be given lesser importance. Okay, that is responsible for all the chaos. See, everybody wants extraordinary attention, but definitely what we have to understand is, even though we are in a private hospital, even though we are paying for that particular, the situation is not same. We are in an emergency situation where we are all overburdened with cases. So in such a situation, triaging of the patients is done by the healthcare team. For example, I am taking care of the patient, okay, who is admitted under me. Okay, I have got 10 patients. I have got 2 nurses. So who has to receive more attention? Out of those 10 patients, okay, I would like to prioritize 2 or 3 patients who deserve more attention. So they will be given more attention initially, and then we will come to the other patients. Okay. So that is something which our patients and the relatives also have to understand, because ultimately it is for the benefit of the patient. We have admitted the patient. We have admitted the patient in the hospital, and depending upon the the need of the moment, okay, the attention will be given to that particular patient. One thing you can be rest assured is, if your patient is not being frequently inquired, or if your patient is not being frequently visited, that means your patient is doing well, and you need not worry much about the outcome of your particular patient.
Thank you, sir. So if at all, as you mentioned, patient is doing fine, then that patient is most probably going to get discharged. If at all the patient is requiring an ICU, many of them are very, very scared about that scenario of someone requiring a higher up supervision or a higher amount of vigilance on the patient's well-doing. So how, if you can throw some light on that aspect, that will be great.
See, ICU again, see, whatever deaths we are seeing, whatever complications we are seeing in COVID are all due to delayed presentation. Okay. Why? See, saturation will not go to 70 before coming to 90. We have to
Very
understand.
true. Very true.
Okay. If we catch the patients at 90, the need of our ICU itself will drastically come down. Okay.
True.
In COVID, it is the timing which is very, very important. If you lose that window, if the patient crosses that particular time, then bringing them back is going to be a very, very Herculean task on the healthcare facilities, whatever we are available at present. The patient goes into an ICU, he gets stuck there for 10 to 15 days. So if we are full with 25 patients, see, 25 patients will block the beds for 15 days. Okay, then the availability of the beds of ICU will drastically come down. So what is there in our hands is we have to identify ourselves. We have to monitor ourselves and seek medical attention even when there is a window for that particular, okay, for a particular treatment, okay, to be given. Once you cross the window, whatever, see, ICU is what? ICU is not a treatment, it is only support. A patient going into an ICU requires higher support in the form of higher requirement of oxygen and maybe a non-invasive ventilation or a high flow oxygen or maybe a ventilator itself, or we can go up to the ECMO level as well. See, what I would suggest is, what I would request is, rather than looking for going to the waiting till the stage you require an ICU and then looking for an ICU bed, and rather than crying for the ICU bed, we should make it a point to reach the hospital early at the right time. As I told you, saturation will come to 94, 92, 93, 88 before going to 70, before going to 50. We have to catch that particular moment and reach the hospital, and appropriate execution of the treatment at that right time will decrease majority of the ICU admissions. That I can tell you.
నైట్ అంతా అక్కడ విండోలోనే పని బాయ్ లాగిన్ అవ్వలేదా?
Okay. So you, as we are emphasizing from the starting, it's the timing of the oxygen saturation drop. It's always the treatment of COVID is based on timing, and nothing else. And the best treatment for COVID is actually prevention. So kindly wear masks. That is something which we need to emphasize on. Let me talk a little, let me ask a little bit off the topic question about oxygen concentrators and oxygen cylinders being hoarded up by the people at home. What is your take on the oxygen concentrators? Is it useful before someone gets reaches the hospital, or is it more useful after someone gets discharged from the hospital?
See, again, see, the thing is, people are, piling the, buying oxygen concentrators. They are storing oxygen cylinders and all those. You see, majority of the times it is not required. Okay, not everybody who gets COVID will become oxygen dependent. I told you, 85% of the people will just have it like a common cold, and it will go within maybe 6 to 7 days, or rather maybe 8 to 10 days. Okay, see, there is no need to take any extravagant action. I think we have got enough resources to handle majority of the patients who come to us, and need for oxygen, if at all it is required, can be provided at the hospital level only. And there are some patients who are in ICU for a longer duration of time. They spend maybe close to 20-25 days in the hospital. They are maybe because of the financial reasons, or maybe because of the mental reasons or physical reasons, they would like to go back home. What we are also not doing anything more than giving just supplemental oxygen with some basic oral medications at the hospital. They are the ones who might require oxygen concentrators at home, okay, to continue, the care, whatever was being given at the hospital, for a slightly longer duration of time, and eventually they will also come out of oxygen. It's all matter of time. So if you ask me, see, don't pile up, don't run behind oxygen concentrators, don't run behind oxygen cylinders. Just monitor yourselves. That is most important. Okay. The need for oxygen arises, okay, at home level. in people who are discharged from the hospital, okay, rather than people who are having an hypoxia in the initial 7 to 10 days. They cannot be treated at home based with only supplemental oxygen. There needs to be additional medications which have to be given, and providing all that care, okay, at home level might not be an easy task, okay. Therefore, don't run behind oxygen concentrators, don't run behind oxygen cylinders. Just make yourself, what to say, vigilant, be vigilant, monitor your, and reach the hospital or reach the appropriate specialist at the right time, so that you can save your money, you can save yourself from going into the requirement of oxygen.
Thank you. So now that since we have spoken about the hospitalization part, can we talk about recovery? Since you handle most of the patients who have recovered from COVID and you have been treating patients from last wave as well, what is your overall take on the recovery process of COVID? Because not many people are talking about recovery, and because patients who are having COVID recover, so how do you address them? What do you advise them, especially on the exercise front? A lot of people exercise immensely because they have survived COVID, they want to become fit, and because of that, they try to go overboard and exercise. So what is your advice on that front after you talk about your recovery aspects?
I think this is a very, very good question, Prashant. I think this is something which is not addressed. See, COVID is a viral infection. See, any severe viral infection, for example, whether it is a dengue or whether it is any other, maybe chikungunya or something, whatever we have had it in the past, okay, they are all known to drag things for a longer duration of time. Any severe viral infection will drain some things out of you, and especially COVID, along with draining you physically, it is draining you people are people more mentally rather than physically. So that is very, very important. I'll tell you, I'll make it a point, my point clear. Recovery is a rule in COVID. Everybody who gets COVID will eventually recover. The time for recovery might vary in various individuals depending upon the severity of the initial presentation or the complications, whatever they have had during those 14 to 15 days. So most important thing is be confident that you will be back to normal life in a short while. Okay, that period might vary in different individuals, because I am not like Prashant and Prashant is not like somebody else. So every individual is different. The response of the body to that particular virus will be different in different individuals. So recovery is a rule. Be confident, be positive. Everybody will eventually recover. The second thing is the time to recovery between individuals. Don't try to compare yourselves with that. He had COVID, he has recovered, I am yet to recover, I am still having this weakness, I am still having this loss of smell and all those things. Yes, you are whatever he had this thing, what to say, who had COVID is different from you. Okay, he has recovered in 5 days. Please be patient for another 5 days. You will also eventually recover. Okay, that recovery is a rule. Be confident that you are going to recover. The recovery time might vary in different individuals. Okay, so what are the common things which are seen in the, what to say, in post-COVID individuals? See, people are frightened about post-COVID fibrosis. See, fibrosis is a rule of healing. Any injury to the body heals with fibrosis. Okay, lungs are such a large organs. If you open it up, see, it has a square, what area of 300 square meters. Okay, out of 300 square meters, what is utilized? Less than 100 square meters of lung is utilized for the normal living. You have got more than 200 square meters left out lung, which is unused. Even if there is a mild fibrosis or mild injury to the lung, nothing is going to happen in future. Your lungs will compensate for it and you will live normally. Out of more than 3,000 patients, severe patients, whatever we have seen, I have hardly had any post-COVID lung fibrosis coming to me with crippled lungs or with decreased oxygen during the follow-up. Okay, so don't bother, don't read too much, don't bother much about post-COVID fibrosis. If you ask me, there is a terminology called post-COVID fibrosis is it should be taken away because we are yet to see. Okay, we are just 1 year old into the disease. We are not seeing so many cases whom we presume that they are going to go into fibrosis, and most of them have recovered completely. If you repeat a CT scan or if you assess the oxygen saturation at the end of 6 months after having a severe COVID, the saturation is normal. The purpose of lung is to maintain oxygen saturation, and if it is maintaining the oxygen saturation, whatever might be the percentage of injury to the lungs, whatever might be the percentage of fibrosis to the lung, it really doesn't matter. So don't bother much about post-COVID. See, the recovery will happen and eventually it will happen. It will vary. Okay, the timings might vary, but eventually recovery will happen and the patients will come back to normalcy. So post-COVID fibrosis is something which is not to be worried about. And even if there is a fibrosis, the extent of fibrosis is important and not 2 or 3 bands of fibrotic atelectasis, which are seen normally. If you do 100 CT scans, out of 100 people, 80 people will have some or the other kind of fibrosis in their lungs. So don't worry much about the fibrosis. The second important thing is weakness. See, weakness is something which is very common and which is very, very common with any kind of viral illness. And that will take some time to recover. Okay, don't worry too much about your weakness. See, the strength, whatever has been drained out mentally and physically, will be gained over a period of time. So what is required is a positive frame of mind. Anybody who survives COVID for more than 10 to 12 days is cured. Okay, the residual effects will take some time and eventually you will be back. Okay, whether it is loss of smell, whether it is loss of taste, whether it is weakness, whether it is headache, okay, or whether it is some people will have some sinusitis kind of picture. Okay, they are coming with sinusitis kind of a picture. They will all eventually recover. Okay, let us be positive. Okay, so have a positive frame of mind and believe that you are going to recover. Good diet is very important. And Prashant told, see, anything, exercise. See, there is a terminology that is one of my favorite terminologies. Wherever I go, I tend to, tell about this. This was something which was written in our forensic medicine laboratory. There is nothing called poison in this world. Everything depends upon the dose. Okay. So anything in excess is going to cause problems. Even if you want to exercise, I don't I don't discourage you to exercise. See, pace it up. See, you go all guns blazing, soon after recovery, your body will not be in a position to take it. Then you might end up with furthermore complications. So good exercise, good amount of, good quality diet and a positive frame of mindset is the thing which is required in the post-recovery, post-COVID recovery phase. And if we have all these 3 things, I think good hydration also. I think you should drink an adequate water. Okay, so these 4 are the important things in the post-COVID phase. And one thing I'll tell you, everybody who has got COVID will recover completely. It's all matter of time. Okay, so don't worry, be positive, you will recover.
Thank you, Dr. Sandeep. So follow-up question to that. A lot of people are now interested.
Be loud.
Now, can you hear me?
The voice has come down suddenly.
Suddenly. Okay, let me figure this part out.
Slightly louder, Prashant.
Now is it better? Lower. Let me just take it out.
Prashant, we can hear you well.
Hello?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
I can hear, slightly be louder.
Okay.
I need to consult you for my
to this is
hearing levels. I think.
yeah, we can do that.
Everybody else is hearing.
To this
Yeah.
particular thing after recovery, not many people are focusing on after recovery because that is a huge chunk of it. So what do you advise these so-called people who want to help people recover from COVID? What are the specific needs that they need to focus on? Any advice for you for the people who are trying to create this post-recovery phase for the general masses?
Yeah, see, again, see, what the way, see, fatality, if you come at a community level, helping each other, I think, see, there are some patients who might be discharged from the hospital, who might be requiring oxygen at home. They would have advised oxygen at home by the treating doctors. When as a community helpers, if you are looking at as an association, if you want to do something better, you can help them with certain things like procuring an oxygen, rather than buying, I mean, renting it out, renting an oxygen concentrator at home. Okay, arranging for maybe a high protein diet or something like that. You can distribute good protein, good quality diet to such people who are needing, who are in the post recovery phase. The most important thing is letting a shoulder is very important. That itself gives a lot of confidence to the opposite person who is recovering. Giving him what to say, maybe a good positive words, or maybe supporting them emotionally rather than physically would be something which I would like to request associations like you people to come up, create awareness, okay, support them emotionally, okay, and if they need any kind of what to say help in the form of what to say either oxygen concentrators or maybe certain instruments which we might recommend at the time of discharge, I think such things can be procured and they can be given to the patients. But if you ask me, it is only positive frame of mindset which is going to make the patient what to say recover better. Okay, once they have crossed 10 days and if their saturation everything is maintained, they are more or less cured from the disease. And it is just a positive frame of mindset, okay, which is going to keep make them recover in a better way and in an early what to say at an earlier time rather than in a rapid time rather than delaying in the recovery of post-COVID patients.
Got it. So let me open up the mic for everyone, and I would actually there was an interesting question in the chat window. So there was a question in regards to the post-COVID vaccination. How many people are actually needing severe amount, how many are actually progressing to severe amount of COVID infection or severe amount of inflammation? And so let me reframe it. So with vaccination, are you seeing a difference in the number of patients being admitted to the hospital? And if they are getting
as
infected,
far as the infections are concerned, I mean, see, the thing is the equal number of people are getting infected, whether they are vaccinated or not. Okay. So,
severity.
and the proportion of people be vaccinated are very, very, very less. Okay. And the proportion of people who are not vaccinated are very high. Okay. Amongst the people who are vaccinated, see the full course of vaccination and the recommended duration of post-vaccination, what to say, period, okay, as passed in healthcare workers. What we are drastically seeing in healthcare workers is, although the infections are there, see, it has not taken away the rate of infection, but definitely the severity of infection is less. Okay, it is not that, and it is not something like a what to say, maybe a complete solution for this particular thing. Even if they are what to say vaccinated, it is important for everybody to monitor themselves, because there are some people who are worsened even after receiving 2 doses of complete vaccination. So vaccination is required. I don't deny it. Vaccination gives protection. What level of protection we are yet to identify. The third important thing is, even if you are vaccinated, you can get infected. And once you are infected, you need to monitor yourself. Okay. Still, we can miss out on that window. Still, Even if you are vaccinated, although the chances are less, see, out of 100 patients, even if 2 patients progress, it is 100% for those 2 patients. Okay. So even after being vaccinated, if you get infected, it is important for you people to monitor yourself and reach the hospital at the right time in that particular window where appropriate introduction of appropriate treatment will prevent you from going further into the disease.
Got it. So a lot of people are still confused on remdesivir. A lot of people are still confused on plasma therapy. A lot of them are still wondering, where do we get these kind of rare monoclonal antibodies, whatever we are using suddenly all of a sudden. So if you can throw some light on that aspect, because you are the right person to talk about it and reduce the panic and clear the fog around this whole mysterious drugs which are
See,
being
one thing I
used all
tell
of a sudden.
you, as a general public, it is none. I mean, see, I might sound harsh at this particular moment. See, it is not your decision to start all those things. See, I want to make it clear, there is no Sanjeevani in COVID. COVID is a self-limiting disease. It will come, it will go. In that period, in between these two extremes, it causes certain damage to that particular individual. Okay. The discretion of starting somebody on something should be the whole and sole decision of the treating doctor and not the relative or the patient attender. This is something which I want to make it clear. Remdesivir, if the treating doctor feels like he has to give the remdesivir, he will prescribe. It is our responsibility as as the relatives or as the caregivers to that particular patients to procure that remdesivir if at all it is available. Now remdesivir is being easily made available to the hospitals directly from the government. Okay, it should be the whole and sole decision of the treating doctor rather than the caregiver, because he is the expert and he is the one who will take the decision regarding the management of the patient. And as far as these newer monoclonal antibodies, everything, you see, COVID has activated everybody. I think, see, I mean, see, it is a pitiable thing on our part that every person, whether he is a businessman, whether he is a transport owner, whether he is a Ayurvedic doctor, whether he is a allopathic doctor, whether he is a layman, okay, see, everybody is coming up with one or the other solutions to COVID. Okay, I think we should similarly all these monoclonal antibodies. See, these are all newer drugs. See, we are in the initial stages of pandemic. We really don't know what is really working and what is presumed to be working and what is not working. Okay, so people have went on giving whatever is available, whatever is maybe initial, maybe 2-3 cases response is making somebody to give it to everyone. See, I am personally simple. Okay, see, if we understand the pathophysiology of the disease, see, in viral phase, an antiviral can be introduced. In inflammatory phase, an anti-inflammatory has to be introduced. The best available and the cheapest available anti-inflammatory is steroid, and the best and easily available, simple, not easily available, very easily available antiviral is remdesivir in inpatients, and ivermectin and favipiravir in outpatients. I think it should not be a priority for a caregiver. It should not be a priority for a relative. The decision has to be whole and solely made by the treating physician, and it is our bound responsibility to respect the decision of that particular physician. If he wants to give remdesivir, let him give. If he doesn't want to give remdesivir, let him not. We should not persuade somebody to give, because he is a qualified person who is taking care of the patient. You have taken your patient to him to get your patient treated, and it should be his decision rather than your decision to start somebody on some treatment. And as far as the plasma therapy is considered, I think recently we have got an article which clearly says it is of no use. Okay, plasma therapy, please don't run behind plasma therapy, because procuring, see, it is draining the relatives. People are running from one corner to other corner of the city in search of some things which are not proven to be very, very beneficial. Okay. As far as the plasma therapy is concerned, I think it is more or less ruled out. But the role of remdesivir definitely is there. Role of steroids is there. Role of monoclonal antibodies is there. But that decision should be a physician decision rather than, I mean, we persuading somebody to, start him on some monoclonal antibody or start him on some remdesivir. I don't personally advocate that. If I were to be a patient, I would leave my physician to take decision on all those things, even though I am a physician myself.
Got it, sir. So I think it's high time that we open up the mic because we have last 10 minutes left in this conversation. So people who have any question can raise their hand and then I will unmute them and they can ask them the question. Starting off with Mr. Shankar Sahana.
Yeah, hi, Prashant. Hi. I'm Dr. Sankrishna and I'm an ENT surgeon. I have this question for Sandeep. You said this is like any other normal viral. I don't think any other normal viral would have brought the country to the knees or the world to the knees, number one. Number two, there are a lot of young people who went into the hospital. They came out and just before getting discharged, they either developed myocarditis or through a thrombus. Wouldn't happen in a normal viral, number two. And with the third wave expecting to hit the children, God knows what's going to happen. I think the whole government has failed, the system has failed, everything has failed. And I want to know what is, today we are giving them azithromycin, whatever the cocktails. Now, if you look at the latest ICMR today has released saying 94% and below, you need to be careful. You say 90%. So everybody comes out with their own things. Today they say azithromycin is a no-no, but we are giving azithromycin. Ivermectin, they say it's okay. So what is your preferred line of treatment in HB, in global, that you all are following for an outpatient basis? Number two, on Mucor, what is your standing post-discharge? What are your advice that you give the patient to monitor Mucor? Because by the time the patients come, they have a swollen eye and they have a discharging eye, and you know that they're not going to make it, because for the treatment of Mucor, the cost ranges anywhere between 3 to 12 lakhs. Where do they have the money? They're all broke. They've spent all the money for the treatment of COVID. And it's a pathetic state. There are many patients who are just taking the patient home and they die within a day or two. I think this is a terrible time that we are all seeing. Prashant must be seeing a lot of Mucor in Sagar and both BGS Global. The cost of amphotericin, which was 3,200, is shot up to 12,000 per vial. I mean, I basically think if I had COVID and I was a diabetic, I would prefer being dead rather than going through a Mucor, getting your eyes removed, recovering through that, going through another reconstructive surgery. When is this going to end? And now they are trying to find causes. Oh, it's in the air, Mucor is in the air, it's in the wind. I mean, there should be some accountability to all this. Bombay has seen it, Gujarat has seen it. Bangalore, we are seeing a huge number of Mucors, huge numbers. So, Sandeep, I think this is where I came in. There are big centers that are handling many cases. St. John's, Saga is there, BGS is there. I think we all are having difficulties. As doctors, we are treating patients, but we are confused. Some say, don't give this, some say, don't give that. I think there's a whole lot of discrepancy there. So we need to come down to a certain thing, whether to give ecosprin, not to give ecosprin. There are a lot of these issues that are there. We are doctors. What about the common man? He's in a lurch. He doesn't know what to do. That poor guy doesn't know what to do. They call me and say, my father is dying in the ambulance. I'm going around 7 places. It's sad. They're not getting admissions. Hospitals are turning them away. They take the phone call. They say, no bed, dumb, slam the phone. If it's any of our relative, what are we going to do? I mean, this is where we are in a mess. So this virus is something, and God forbid the third wave comes, the children are going to get affected. I think we are staring at something really bad. That's all I had to say, Sandeep. And I'm sure Prashant is doing a good job with the debridements and etc. Your hands must be full. But please be safe, both of you. I think we are still not out of the woods. There are many more things to come ahead. But to what I sit here at home and I hear, because I have a mother who's 84, don't want to bring it to her. It's quite still not, we are not out of the woods. It's quite scary still. So anyway, this is just that I had in mind. Thank you.
Yes, sir. See, the thing is, I really appreciate your words here. See, I told you, see, this is a pandemic situation. This is an emergency situation. Majority of us are not very clear on the exact nature of the disease, the what to say, the complications it might cause and all those things. See, with every day we are learning new things about COVID. See, none of us had seen this before 2019. Definitely, it is a new virus. That is why the impact is slightly more. Again, I am telling you repeatedly, it is not a virus which is different from others. Okay, just because it has come as a pandemic, just because it is a new virus, the amount, the severity, or the impact it is causing is more. Okay, we have seen similar pandemics in the past also. See, when I was a post-graduation, H1N1 was there. I would rather say it was much more severe than COVID. In COVID, out of 100 cases, we are seeing around 5 to 10 going, 5% going into ICU. In H1N1, the scenario was different. Okay, majority of the people, at least it never used to spare pregnant women and children also. We have lost a lot of children and pregnant women during the H1N1 pandemic. But as compared to that pandemic, because there was not much awareness, there was no internet, there was no free WhatsApp, there were no so many news channels during those times, which did not take that pandemic to this level. Although the burden of the number of cases, if we went on counting at that time of H1N1, then we would have reached at least half of the number, whatever we have reached now. I think, see, let us not get scared about the presence of the virus. Let us not get scared about the complications it is causing. Let us not get ourselves emotionally down or mentally down, expecting the third wave. Whether it is going to affect children, whether it is not going to affect children. See, these are all ifs and buts. And in medicine, I am telling you, 1 + 1 is not always 2. It can be 3 also. It can be 4 also. So what, as a pulmonologist, as a treating physician, as a responsible, healthcare giver, what I can tell you is, don't lose hope. Hope is something which will drive us. Let us all be confident. Let us all be united. Let us all be aware of things and tackle this particular pandemic rather than expecting certain things to happen and being low on confidence. So that is something. Again, with all due respect to sir's words, complications are happening. Early identification is the key. Whatever is best possible from our side, we are all doing it, and we will continue to do it.
Thank you, Dr. Sandeep, for that. End of it all, the take-home message is we need to stay positive, and definitely it is, as Dr. Sandeep mentioned, that people can recover from it, and will definitely will. Yes, definitely will. So one important point which Dr. Shankar had mentioned was about people collapsing on day 10 and day 11. Kindly understand that people are collapsing suddenly because of pulmonary embolism.
That is something which, see, out of 100 cases, it is there in less than 0.25%.
No, so as a precautionary measure, people should move their toes and keep mobile. Once someone develops COVID, they should not be sitting idle. That is the most important thing. Don't sit idle. Even if you are sitting and resting, kindly move your limbs, lower limbs especially. Move your feet, wiggle your toes. That will ensure that there's no clot formation happening in the legs. That will ensure that you won't have a sudden collapse kind of a situation. Going on to the next person, Balaji P, you have raised your hand. You can ask a question, please. You can unmute yourself and ask the question. I think Balaji had.
Hello.
Yeah. Hello.
And-
Yeah, Balaji, we can hear
Hello.
you.
Good morning, everyone. All the doctors for the
Good morning.
participation and for making this webinar happen. Doctor, you have been telling, Dr. Shankar also was mentioning about mucormycosis. It's a post-COVID whether it happens only for diabetic patients or to everyone.
See, let me take this question because I am operating and seeing a lot of mucormycosis patients. So please understand that during this pandemic, this is the second wave. During the first wave, people are still staying indoor. People are not walking around. They're not exercising. They're not taking care of their health. They're just become sedentary. So a lot of patients are underlying undiagnosed diabetics. Kindly understand that you need to exercise at least moderately. You can walk around inside your homes. You can have nutritious diet. You need to ensure that you are not diabetics, because most of the patients whomever I've treated are diabetic and their sugar levels are extremely high. So kindly ensure that you test yourself for diabetes, monitor your sugar levels, exercise well. And yes, mucormycosis unfortunately is seen more in COVID, post-COVID cases with patients who have had cornerstone of treatment for very severe cases of COVID is steroids. Steroids have the tendency to increase the sugar levels. So as Dr. Sandeep and other doctors have been telling, judicious usage of steroids is essential. Kindly don't self-medicate and abuse steroids just because they've been mentioned as the treatment of choice, as the low cost anti-inflammatory medication. Don't unnecessarily go and get buy steroids and abuse it, because you definitely would be an underlying diabetic which you are not known to. Whenever I advise people to get their blood sugar tested, they'll tell, no doctor, I'm absolutely fine, I'm not a diabetic. When I get the HbA1c done, then I can show to them that they're actually a full-blown diabetic. So this is something which is the root cause, so kindly mention. And the best preventive measure for mucor is wearing a mask. Once you wear a mask, you'll prevent yourself from getting a mucormycosis. You'll also stop yourself from getting a COVID infection. And unlike COVID infection, mucormycosis is very, very, very deadly. So let me re-emphasize that. Even though we do absolutely everything to prevent a death, at what stage will they go in for any complication? We never know, because it invades the blood vessels, and blood vessels are there across the whole body. It's not just limited to your nose. It will go into your lungs, it will go into your kidneys, it can go everywhere possible. So the only prevention is to ensure that you control your sugar levels, and kindly tell your doctors, and don't over abuse with steroids. I think that has answered the question, hopefully. Going on to Anand, you can ask your question.
Yeah, good morning, doctor. One question regarding the second wave is the progression of the disease and the treatment protocols. Has it fundamentally become more severe and more intense, or is it just that because of the high volume of cases, we are finding the second wave to be more damaging?
So Dr. Sandeep, you can take that.
I'm not. Can you repeat the question, Prashant?
So are they asking, is there any difference between the first wave and second wave in the treatment protocol and the severity of the disease?
See, treatment, the principle of the treatment is same. There is no change. Even if 200, 300 variants come, the symptoms are going to be the same. The damage, what it's going to cause, is going to be the same. In fact, because the second wave is slightly different in the form of infectivity. That means the rate of infection is slightly more as compared to what it was before. So that is something which we have clearly seen. And as far as the mortality is concerned, mortality is still less than 1% only, somewhere around 1% only. That just the proportion of cases have gone up. Similarly, the number of deaths have also gone up. It is not, the rate of death has been the same. Okay. The morbidity associated with the disease is again depends upon the timing of presentation. If people who have come at the right time have received appropriate treatment and most of them have come out, the only ones who have missed that window are the ones who are in the ICU and stuck in ICU and are ending up with complications. So those are the 2-3 major differences what I have seen. Infectivity is definitely more. Mortality is not changed. The presenting symptoms are also more or less because the people were not aware of this diarrhea and all those things during the last things, but we have seen diarrhea being present and this headache being present, this weakness being present, all these things we have seen clinically. As far as a physician approach is concerned, as far as my analysis is concerned, I think the major difference is the infectivity rate, very, very high as compared to what it was. Other than that, there are not many changes.
Thank you, Dr. Sandeep. I think it's time that we wrap this whole webinar up. And I would like to ask you for the final closing comments from your side as a take-home message for all. What would be that take-home message?
That is what I told you. See, going by today's topic only. See, post-COVID, everybody recovery is a role. Don't worry. Okay, it might take some time. Okay, the time might vary between individuals, but recovery is a role. 99.9% of the people who cross 10 to 14 days without any issues will recover completely. Even people who are in ICU, once they are discharged, they might take a slightly longer duration of time. They will also recover completely. Okay, and being positive, having good diet, okay, and reasonably planned exercise regimen, good hydration, okay, and being positive. So these are the 5 things which I would recommend in the post-COVID recovery phase for everybody to come out of this particular menace. That's it. I think.
Thanks a lot for your time and your valued points, whatever you have made. And I would hand over to Mr. Ramakant sir to have the closing comments.
Oh, I thank each and everyone participant first, as well as both the doctors panel. They have taken a lot of trouble addressing our HSR community. My special request is, we'll be having a series of webinars like this with the eminent personality doctors who have got working at the different hospitals and others. So my request is the people those who have missed this particular webinar will be circulating the video form of a webinar. They can go through it. And as and when we call for the next webinar also, please inform the other people to take part and share the knowledge and spread it to others. As I told you that creating awareness among the community is one of the most important thing what we are doing, the positive approach, and be positive and come to the next meeting. Thank you so much for all participants. Thank you, Dr. Saab, Dr. Prashant, and Dr. Sandeep. Thank you.
One last comment is